Morning everybody, welcome to IndyCar on Sunday. Sorry I didn't manage to post the time of this broadcast, and I know also that it clashes with a couple of marches today, one in Glasgow, one which was, what was it, yesterday in London. So we've got two marches, two different cities for two seemingly completely different things. The social media today is filled with, well, lots of people screaming at each other about whether the First Minister should have been in London yesterday and whether she should be in Glasgow today at George Square for the Big Hope Over Fear rally. Now, before I start into the sort of the rights and the wrongs of this, I should point out to you that I've always thought that there is a place for rallies and marches, as well as things like little TV blogs like this, major TV shows, newspaper campaigns, 500-mile walks. All of these things have a value to keeping the cause of independence in people's imaginations all the time, and to keep reminding people that there's always that option, that the option stays on the table all the time, no matter what happens with Brexit or Theresa May or the European Union or anything else, that this is always there. It's not going to go away. So there's a value to marches, a very strong value to marches, despite the fact that not all of us believe that they achieve very much. Some people think that people shouting at crowds of people in large town squares and city squares has no effect, and that they're simply preaching to the converted. But as I say, they do keep the cause in the public eye, whether you agree with them or not. But is it the most effective way to campaign? Well, I don't know. I can't really answer that question. It's a way to campaign. I've been on a number of rallies, and I've given a couple of speeches at rallies in the past, and to some extent it's very uplifting, and it keeps the pot boiling, it keeps people enthusiastic and campaigning. So it's a good thing from the point of view of activism and keeping people concentrating on the actual task of convincing others. But the rallies themselves tend not to convince other people. They tend to simply be rallying points for those who are already active to stay active and to persuade their friends to become active. So there is a positive aspect to marches and rallies. Now, the question that is on everybody's lips this morning is, should Nicola Sturgeon have gone to London to be seen on a stage alongside many other British politicians from all kinds of different parties, including a selfie with Alistair Campbell, which seems to have caused a complete uproar across social media. But should it have, when all of the people who are in London campaigning to end Brexit are actually all campaigning for the same thing? Nicola Sturgeon has said from the beginning that Scotland wants to stay in the European Union. And whilst we've not had a date for a referendum yet on independence, the first thing surely is to make sure that we stay safe and that there aren't any job losses, and that people aren't forced onto the breadline, and that they don't start to lose access to their medicines and foods, and there aren't shortages and there isn't a crisis. The first duty of any First Minister or Prime Minister or Minister of State is to protect the country that is in their charge. And although Nicola Sturgeon is being criticised widely by many in the independence movement for seemingly abandoning her post and going to London, that's not the case. She is the leader of the country. She's not just a campaigner for independence. She leads a country. She runs a government which has to do the day job. It has to keep the wheels of Scotland turning. It has to keep public services running with a diminishing budget, which is being set by a crazy government in London. But while she has to do that, she couldn't abandon the cause of Brexit. She couldn't not turn up and make her voice heard, because she's probably one of the most vocal anti-Brexiteers in the British Isles at the moment. And she's the only, as far as I know, the only major party leader who has come out and said, I'm anti-Brexit, I don't believe in it at all. All of the other British political leaders seem to either be sitting on the fence or are actively campaigning for Brexit, whether they believe in it or not. So I think it was important for Nicola to go to that march, maybe only the one march, and to present herself on that stage and tell the people of England what the people of Scotland think of Brexit, because they are not hearing what we think, because Parliament is not allowing our MPs to speak with anybody present, and the BBC is not allowing our MPs to be heard in the media in England. So Scotland is not being heard down there, and for Nicola Sturgeon to go down there is really just to show the people of England that Scotland does not want Brexit, and it has never wanted it, and it has voted against it. 62% of people in Scotland voted against it, and that number has risen in recent months. So it's part of our job to make sure that the government, which at the moment is in charge of running Scotland's budget, in other words, giving us the money that we need to run our own country, that the people in that country whose government is telling us how much money we're allowed to get, that they can see that Scotland's not happy with this whole Brexit carry-on, and definitely that feeling has got stronger. Does it make any difference to the independence campaign whether Brexit is called off or not? And a lot of people are scared that if Brexit is called off, that somehow or other the whole issue of independence will suddenly lose a lot of its momentum. Personally, I don't think that will happen, because what is clear from the whole Brexit carry-on, and it's a carry-on that's lasted 3 years, is that the British government, and the Tories especially, cannot make their minds up whether they want to be in or out of Europe. They are completely split down the middle. The country is a schizophrenic mess, if you pardon the expression, and I'm probably offending people with schizophrenia, but the country has a split personality at the moment between those who want to remain in Europe and those who fundamentally hate it. But the actual number of people who fundamentally hate it is a lot smaller. Nigel Farage's great big Brexit march attracted just 200 people. Now, this march in London yesterday attracted over 1 million people from all across the United Kingdom, including a very large contingent from Scotland, incidentally, and all the Scottish MPs and the leader of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, as well. So if that doesn't say something about the way Scotland feels, nothing will. But also, if Brexit does happen, and it is a hard no-deal Brexit, then every effort has been made by Scotland to make sure that we are protected from Brexit, that we have made every single legal, democratic move that's possible for anybody to make to try and protect Scotland from Brexit. So if and when it does happen, and believe it or not, it could still go ahead, it's not certain that it's going to be stopped, but if it goes ahead at all, if we go out without a deal, if Mrs May's deal passes, or if there's a general election and a new Tory government comes in with a new leader and they come up with a new deal, I'm pretty certain that Brexit is going to keep on going, because it seems obvious that certain people in the British establishment, very powerful people in the British establishment, want Brexit to happen. And a lot of very influential people who are Tory party donors seem to want Brexit to happen. So there's a battle going on between this dark group who seem to really want it and the rest of us who don't, or who are undecided about it. Either way, at the end of this weekend, we'll have had 2 marches in 2 cities. One to stop us from leaving the Union, and the other one to encourage us to leave the Union. Now, the one that's going to encourage us to leave the UK can base its arguments on the mess that Brexit was. Even if Brexit doesn't happen, the sheer absolute, what would you say, indecision, the dithering, and the incompetency of the Tory government in England is reason enough to want to have your own country back and to take back control from the Tories and have it always in Holyrood, where we can elect people that we trust to do the right thing for us, not for 55 million people in the neighbouring country, but for our country. It doesn't mean that we want to be separate from England, because we will always be neighbours and we will always trade and we'll always have friendly relations with people in England. But it doesn't mean we have to do what they say any more than they have to do what we say. And all that's happened with Nicola going to London is that it's allowed those people in England to hear her and to hear the truth about how Scotland feels about Brexit, and to see how strong that commitment is. The fact that Nicola was there and didn't stay away and going to a rally preaching to the converted in Glasgow meant that she was taking that message to London, saying, look, we don't want Brexit. We've never wanted it. We're not going to put up with it. And if it does go ahead, we will have a referendum and we will be out of the door. I think even if the Brexit doesn't happen, I think the independence referendum still will happen, because if, as I say, if nothing else, Brexit has proved that Scotland will always be sidelined. Whenever a huge decision like this is made, we're not listened to. We're swept aside. We are kept like children in the playpen while the grown-ups decide what should happen. That cannot happen anymore. For one thing, as I pointed out the other day, in Scotland, the people are the ones who are the ultimate arbiters of what happens to the country. And that is legally bound up in our constitution. Our constitution is based on the Declaration of Arbroath and the Claim of Right, our two founding documents that guarantee our rights. And those rights are that we, as the people, have the right to decide how and who governs us. And that means that we have the ultimate right to say that we do not want London governing us. And that cannot be taken away. And now that we know that, and now that that has been in the open for several years now, since well before 2014, but now it's become common knowledge that Scotland can do this and its people do have this power, that all that's happening in England is that the news of that, the fact that Scottish people have that power, has been kept from the English people, deliberately kept from them. The BBC won't report it. I noticed that the BBC was very careful this morning to not run any film of yesterday's rally and to try and play it down. They didn't run any video clips this morning in the news of that rally. They mentioned it in passing, but it was only for about 5 seconds. And they didn't mention Nicola Sturgeon's presence once. Not at all. So there is an effort by both the Tory government and the BBC to minimise the effect of Scotland on Brexit, and its presence is being airbrushed out of existence constantly by British propaganda. And that is the thing that Nicola was trying to stop, was to make sure that she was there, because the cameras would follow her to that march, because she is a figure of great renown across the rest of the world. And even if the BBC failed to film her, other countries' media would be closely watching and recording her and broadcasting her comments. So it's a battle of propagandists. It's a battle between the British Brexiteers and the British government, who are trying to minimise Scotland and its presence anywhere in Britain, and its opinions anywhere in Britain. And that's the exact reason why we need independence, simply because we are invisible, and the BBC and the government are colluding to make sure that we stay that way. Now, personally, I don't like being invisible, and everything that I'm doing at the moment is designed to make sure that Scottish people and English people, whoever watches this little show, and whoever also watches Broadcasting Scotland, will get some truth, and also get some real analysis of what's actually going on, instead of skating over the surface of it like the mainstream media does. So to that end, today, myself and the director of Broadcasting Scotland, we're meeting with representatives of an Italian company who may want to invest in Scotland's new media, its new television station. And if we manage that, and if we do manage to get a small amount of funding to set the programmes up on a more regular basis, that will be the beginning of kicking the propagandists out of Scotland, and making sure that people in Scotland, whether they be unionists, English people, Welsh people, anybody who's arrived here, who's made their home here and become Scots, that they can hear the truth from Scotland, not from England, not from London, not from the BBC, not airbrushed, not edited, but simply the truth of what's happening in Scotland right now, the truth about Scotland's economy, the truth of the power of its exports, and the sheer amount of innovation and new industries which are being created in Scotland all the time. All of that will become more evident. And that again is part of this move to get people to think of Scotland as a country that's already free to decide who rules it. And then it's just a case of asking people to decide on whether they want London to bumble along and airbrush you out of existence and make a whole lot of stupid, careless, callous decisions which are going to starve people of funding. They're going to cut people's benefits. They're going to force people into humiliating assessments by bureaucratic private companies that the Tories have got shares in. All of that could be swept away. And we want to show people that that could be the Scotland that they could live in if they wanted. It's not necessarily about, it's not about tartan, it's not about saltires, it's about people's lives, and it's about the reality of living in Scotland as opposed to living under English Tory rule, which is what is wrong with Scotland at the moment. So my job, as I say, is to try to get the truth out and to try to persuade people. And I do that by this little blog, and I do that by doing the show with the Scotland at 7 show on Broadcasting Scotland on Thursday nights. And if I can do that every night on Scotland at 7 with Linda's team, and we are getting paid to do it, we can produce far more programming of a much higher quality. And we can start to produce documentaries, science programs, technology programs. We can start to produce panel shows. We can start to produce comedies, short dramas. We can start to produce thrillers and crime dramas. All of these things can be done if the funding is there. The reason that we don't get all of that Scottish television programming is because the BBC is the only commissioning body in Scotland which is allowed, or gives itself the power, to decide which programmes are made and who makes them. And then they claim them for their own. So a lot of BBC productions made in Scotland are not made by the BBC, they're made by Scottish crews. But the BBC then stamps its BBC badge on it and pretends that they made it. And these are the things we want to stop. So marching, yes, it has a place in keeping people's minds focused on the job, and it keeps activism going. It keeps people enthusiastic. It keeps them talking to their neighbours and explaining the benefits of leaving the UK Union and running our country from Holyrood instead of being run by these idiots in London, because they are idiots, and we've seen that over 3 years. They are idiotic, stupid, self-serving, selfish, corrupt, and generally completely ignorant people who have no idea how the rest of us are forced to live because of their decisions. Anyway, I've got to leave it there for today. To everybody who's been arguing about Nicola Sturgeon, just stop arguing about it, because, to be honest with you, it's a non-story, and the more we split over things like that, the more the British media will drive wedges between us. There's a place for marching, there is a place for rallies, there's a place for 500-mile walks, there's a place for walks to London, there is a place for First Ministers travelling to London to make our views known, and there's a place for our MPs doing the same thing in London with other MPs from other parties, because we're not alone in hating Brexit, and there is nothing wrong with sharing a platform with other parties who feel the same way. We have to find common cause with people sometimes. We cannot just make everybody in England our enemies, because they just aren't our enemies. There are a lot of people in England who are sick to death of the Tories as well. A lot of them looking north with very envious eyes at what we have in Scotland, and many of them actually choosing to flit over the border, to migrate from England to Scotland for a better life. And when that's happening, you know your country's doing something well. So let's quit fighting. Let's do our own things. Everybody is good at something. If you're good at organising rallies, organise rallies, go to rallies. Nothing wrong with that. If you're good at cartoons, I know Wee Scribbles is a fantastic cartoonist. If you're good at making movies, if you're good at writing songs, there are people all across the independence movement doing their own things. Many talented people have come out of the efforts in 2014 and continue to develop their talents and are going from strength to strength. We're not going backwards, remember, and independence doesn't stop just because Brexit does. Brexit is something else. Brexit is a demonstration of the incompetence of the British state. It's nothing more than that. Scotland is a competent, well-run country, and that is what we have to promote. That's what makes people want to vote for independence, not waving flags and shouting at them. It's plain common sense that if your government is doing a better job than the one down the road in England, then it's the one right next door to you that you're going to want in charge. And that's what we have to convince people of, not that England is worse than us or that English people are the enemy. They're not. It's the British government that is the enemy here. The British government is the thing that is making us leave the European Union. It's forcing the whole of Scotland against its will out of its biggest trading area. It is going to cripple our economy. And if anybody was going to go down to London to say that, it should be the First Minister. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. I'll see you all later on. Have a great day. Bye for now.